The emergency session began with a bookkeeping correction and ended with the sound of 300 representatives holding their breath. The council chamber of Concord was built to make empires feel temporary. Its vaulted ring of dark crystal rose above a hollow core where holographic star maps rotated at continental scale, each treaty lane marked in steady blue. When High Commander Sam of the Krellix Merchant League requested speaking priority, the chamber granted it without debate. Krellix fleets moved half the grain, fuel, and industrial polymer in 6 sectors. Their insurers underwrote wars and prevented others. Even species that despised them still priced cargo against Krellix risk tables. In practice, that gave Sam more power than many navies. He stood in the central well on 4 articulated legs, carapace plates polished to mirror bronze, rank chains engraved with market conquests instead of battles. Behind him, his aides projected a revised atlas. Earth's marker vanished first. Then Luna's relay ring. Then the treaty beacons anchored to human convoy corridors from Hadron to Gallus Drift. Each deletion was accompanied by a soft tone, the kind used for completed transactions. By authority of the League's arbitration offices and pursuant to debt harmonization statute, Sam declared, his translator rendering each syllable with serene contempt. The entity known as Earth has never qualified as a sovereign civilization under interstellar mercantile standards. Prior references were clerical indulgences by sentimental administrators, now corrected. Human populations are therefore reclassified as non-sovereign labor pools with regional manufacturing competence and elevated casualty tolerance. Their former trade lanes, colonial forwarding rights, and relief depots are seized as collateral against accrued logistical inefficiencies they imposed on legitimate commerce. Any resistance constitutes piracy against recognized market order. Let this record clarify what superstition obscured. Archive ghosts do not possess borders. No one interrupted him. The map continued to blink as if reality were a ledger that accepted edits without protest. Delegate Thren of the Avians of Kith made a sharp, involuntary sound and lowered his crest in disbelief. 2 Lum Scholar observers exchanged data pulses so quickly, their wearable translators lagged. The Valarii representative, Counselor Aaron Sol, did not move at all, which in her species was the visible sign of anger held by force. Across the upper tiers, several neutral blocks requested verification pings from the central archive and received something worse than error messages. Authenticated updates signed by Krellix legal keys already propagated to secondary commercial nodes. Sam watched the chamber absorb the blow and pressed harder. "You are witnessing administrative hygiene," he said. "For too long, lesser species have confused human noise with human standing. They build durable hulls, yes. They tolerate radiation work and long-haul deprivation, yes. They are useful subcontractors when supervised. But sovereignty is valuation, and valuation is issued by those who understand scale. Primitive petitioners will refrain from theatrical protest. Merchant assets now under League claim include all former humanitarian stations serving outer enclaves, all bonded fuel depots registered under Earth Charities, and all convoys operating in those lanes. Compliance will be rewarded with labor continuity contracts. Defiance will be priced, collected, and forgotten. The grim irony was so blunt it almost became comedy. They had not conquered humanity, so they had invoiced reality instead. On the suspended benches reserved for military observers, officers from 3 species began silent side-channel traffic to their home commands. Admiral Kesh of the Guardians of Thel spoke into her throat mic without opening her mandibles. "Log this as deliberate status erasure," she ordered. "If this holds, no charter species is safe." Sam turned toward her, antennae lifting in amusement. Charter species are safe when they pay on time. The chamber's central archive custodian, an elderly member of the Scholars of Lum named Preceptor Hal, requested formal pause for provenance review. Sam denied it. He did not need legal unanimity, he needed momentum. Krellick's doctrine had always fused market speed to coercion. If systems adopted a new legal reality for even one cycle, insurers, dockmasters, and neutral patrols would enforce it out of habit. Armies fought for months to seize corridors. Krellick's accountants seized them by noon. By the second hour of debate, the first consequences arrived. A relay from Hadron confirmed that 2 Krellick's privateer carriers had approached a human-marked relief depot and demanded transfer of inventory under emergency collateral law. A freighter consortium in the Inal provinces suspended docking rights for vessels flagged to Earth-chartered trusts, pending sovereignty clarification. One refugee enclave routed a plea directly to the council in plain language. Food shipments had stopped, and no one would ensure replacement convoys through disputed lanes. Sam listened to each report as if hearing market weather. Then, he made the mistake that history later attached to his name. He announced seizure orders in open session, with witnesses from every block present. "Let the record reflect operational enforcement," he said. "Broker fleet elements are authorized to impound all human-directed relief infrastructure in outer sectors, effective immediately. Cargoes become League assets. Personnel are to be reassigned under compliant labor frameworks. Resistance is an actuarial event, not a political one." Several delegates protested at once, but procedure throttled them into queue. Before any motion could mature, the chamber screen switched to a live feed from Sam's flagship, Ledger Crown, where market officers stamped digital warrants against human stations as if auctioning warehouse lots. Each stamp triggered legal notifications across 6 sectors. Earth's routes dimmed one by one. In the human delegation tier, Ambassador Catherine Hayes stood only when called, hands folded behind her back. Her expression remained neutral enough to read as fatigue. People who didn't know her assumed she was absorbing a defeat. People who did know her recognized the opposite. Catherine saved anger for moments when it could be converted into structure. She was not alone. To her left sat Admiral Elena Morrison, commander of Earth Fleet Strategic Response. Silver at her temples, posture relaxed in the way of someone who had spent too many years making decisions measured in lives and hours. To Catherine's right, Director Marcus Volkov of Interstellar Compliance watched the legal feed with predatory concentration, pupils tracking signature chains, jurisdiction tags, and insurance lockouts faster than his tablet rendered them. Behind them, Logistics Marshal Ingrid Bergman reviewed freight movement overlays on a split display where hospital tenders, tug chains, and civilian haulers appeared as calm dots in deep space. None of them spoke while Sam delivered his performance. They listened. They recorded. They built a case in real time. When recess was finally forced through by procedural challenge, the human delegation withdrew to a secured consultation vault 2 levels below the chamber. The room was austere, soundproofed, and old enough that its walls still carried physical data ports from an era before quantum relay etiquette. Morrison keyed privacy seals. Volkov projected the altered archive stack across the central table, red lines cutting through 3 centuries of treaties like wounds. He used legitimate signatures on fraudulent substrate, Volkov said. Not forged in the simple sense. He compromised registrar pathways, then filed corrections through accepted channels. If we contest only the content, it drags for months. If we prove chain contamination, we can nuke his legal standing in a day. Catherine nodded once. Can we prove it to neutral auditors, not just to ourselves? We can, came a new voice from the doorway. Preceptor Hal of Lum entered with Counselor Aaron Saul at his side, both under temporary diplomatic immunity seals. Hal placed a crystalline spindle on the table, old storage architecture, physically right-locked. The scholars retained pre-contact mirror copies of first entry treaties as part of observational ethics, he said. The Valari maintained independent transit charters from the refugee corridors your convoys protected. We never expected to need these as weapons. Evidence suggests we were naive. Morrison studied them for a long second. You understand what joining this means? Aaron's soul gave a thin, almost humorless smile. The Krelliks erased your name today. They will erase ours when useful. Neutrality was always a rental agreement. The room shifted from outrage to planning. Bergman expanded a logistics grid. He grabbed our marked depots, not our movement capacity. Civilian military reconfiguration drills are current. If authorization is granted, we can convert non-combat hulls to support webs inside 12 hours and reroute critical aid around impounded nodes. It will look messy, but it will hold. Morrison answered without looking up. It needs to do more than hold. It needs to sustain tempo if this goes kinetic. It will. Volkov flicked a separate layer onto the display, dots appearing around dead moons and abandoned industrial belts. Reserve hull inspections concluded last quarter. Decommissioned in public records, preserved in darkyard custody. Crews are on staggered readiness, officially for disaster response. Catherine looked from one face to another, measuring not confidence, but friction points. There were many. Legal counterstrike required allied custodians willing to testify. Logistical adaptation required civilian cooperation at scale under contested law. Military deterrence required revealing capabilities Earth had kept intentionally ambiguous for decades. Every option carried trade-offs. The resulting tension sat at the center of the table like an uninvited guest. 3 days earlier, this meeting would have been theoretical. Now it was triage. Outside, council notifications kept arriving, each one a new closure, seizure, or denial, stamped with Krelliks authority. Human relief teams on the outer lanes had already begun transmitting constrained reports. Depots surrounded, manifests frozen, refugees panicking as ration forecasts collapsed. Morrison finally broke the silence. If they were merely insulting us, we could wait. They targeted the enclaves. That is coercion through hunger. Catherine's reply was quiet and precise. Then we proceed in sequence. Establish fraud. Issue formal warning under charter language. Set a deadline the chamber can witness. If they reverse, we stabilize. If they do not, we correct by force under documented cause. Volkov exhaled, almost a laugh. He called us archive ghosts. Morrison's gaze hardened, steel blue in the dim light. Ghosts do not run convoy nets across 9 sectors. Ghosts do not keep promises for 300 years while being mocked for it. He is about to learn the difference. Catherine gathered the tablets, the Lum spindle, and the Valeri charter copies into a sealed case marked for council evidentiary submission. Then, she straightened her uniform and headed for the door, where chamber attendants already waited to resume session. The species that had just been erased from the map walked back into the room, carrying the map's original receipts. The chamber attendants announced resumption, and the central well brightened to procedural white as if neutrality could be restored by lighting design. It could not. Catherine Hayes requested emergency evidentiary priority under Council Charter Evidentiary Clause 7, and when the clerk hesitated for half a second, she placed the sealed case on the rail with a firmness that carried to the upper tiers. Submission includes pre-contact mirror treaties held under Lum custodial ethics independent transit charters held by the Valerii, and registrar path analysis from human compliance offices. Together, they establish non-trivial archive contamination through Krelik's legal keys, followed by asset seizure under false sovereignty premises. We request immediate freeze on enforcement and restoration of baseline status pending tribunal review. Sam did not wait for the clerk. Denied by market standing, he said, voice smooth with practiced disdain. Primitive petitioners do not negotiate valuation terms. Your species has no recognized standing from which to invoke charter protections. You may submit artifacts for cultural interest. They do not alter collateral law. Preceptor Hal stepped forward before protocol invited him. The old Lum scholar's translator flickered once, then steadied. For the record, this custodian attests the human treaties are authentic and older than current Krelik's registry standards by 2 legal eras. They predate your debt harmonization framework entirely. Evidence suggests your corrections were not corrections. A ripple moved across the gallery. Sam's aides exchanged fast private bursts. Even from the human tier, Volkov recognized panic hidden beneath efficiency. Sam compensated by escalating in public. Let the chamber observe, he announced, signaling the live feed from Ledger Crown again. Enforcement stands. Additional seizure orders are now issued against all human relief depots servicing outer refugee enclaves under disputed labor authority. Cargo transfer begins immediately. Any vessel interfering with lawful collection is designated hostile property. That was the insult beneath the insult. The line cut where everyone could see it. Not Earth's pride. Not charter semantics. Refugees with no leverage, used as pressure collateral in an accounting war. Catherine did not raise her voice. The restraint made every syllable heavier. Council record this as formal final warning from the United Earth Compact to the Krelik's Merchant League and to High Commander Sam in personal command authority. For 3 centuries, humanity has honored contract law, protected neutral shipping, and absorbed strategic contempt in service of system stability. You have now falsified history to legalize predation and targeted humanitarian lifelines to compel submission. Reverse all seizure orders, restore archival integrity, and withdraw enforcement hulls within 72 standard hours. Failing that, humanity will execute corrective action by force under witnessed cause, and we will pursue full legal dissolution of your coercive market privileges in every reachable forum. The chamber went still enough to hear filtration fans in the ceiling vaults. Sam angled his head, antennae lifting in what his species used for amusement and warning. You still ask permission before moving fleets. That habit will be your epitaph. 72 hours accepted as your performance window. Use it for petitions, not fantasies. Admiral Keshav Thel asked for recognition and received it on the 4th Q cycle. High Commander Sam. Thel requests immediate humanitarian carve-out for civilian food and medicine. Denial will be logged as extortionary conduct under emergency conventions. Sam did not look at her. Thel may purchase waivers at prevailing rates. Sentiment is not a currency. Aaron Soul's stillness finally broke. She touched the rail once, the Valeri signal for irrevocable witness. Then, witness is what you will have. Session dissolved into procedural warfare, motions layered over objections, legal teams racing to secure injunctions, while Krelik's market nodes pushed updates faster than clerks could contest them. Volkov transmitted the evidence package through 6 redundant channels, each mirrored to allied repositories beyond direct Krelik's tampering range. Bergman's console lit with inbound pings from civilian operators asking the same question in different words. Are we still authorized to move aid if they fire first? Morrison answered that network herself. 1-line broadcast with command encryption and plain language echo. Maintain convoy discipline. Do not initiate fire. Record every challenge. Stand by for retasking authority. 90 minutes after session suspension, Earth's warning had propagated through all major council nodes, and the Ledger Crown had posted Sam's refusal as a market bulletin, as if rejecting restraint were another shipping rate. In the secured vault, Catherine signed the final authorizations with a stylus that felt absurdly small for the scale now moving behind it. Formal warning delivered. Witness chain intact. If he complies, we stabilize and still pursue fraud charges. If he does not, we execute response ladder 1 through 3. Volkov closed his tablet. The auditors from Lum and Valeri are already requesting emergency docket. Sam thinks law is a stage prop. He is about to discover it is terrain. Bergman rotated the logistics map until civilian hull icons filled the room like stars. Reconfiguration plans are primed. Hospital tenders, tug chains, bulk freighters, refinery skiffs. They can become support webs in 12 hours, full mesh in 20. We will look less like a fleet and more like a city that learned to move. Morrison stood at the head of the table, gaze moving from legal packets to cargo routes to reserve indicators around dead moons. Her tone remained level, almost quiet. Then we move in sequence and hold sequence. We do not improvise the first hour of a war they designed around our hesitation. Catherine sealed the last file and slid it across to operations. High Commander Sam has chosen on record. Initiate contingency mobilization. No one cheered. Professionals never did at this stage. They acknowledged, transmitted, and went to work. Far from conquered, under the rotating clutter of the Hadron relay debris lattice, Krellick's broker captain Jorvek studied the mission packet and wondered why Central Command had assigned so much ceremony to what looked like routine repossession. His privateer carrier, Dividend Spear, carried insurance observers, 2 media drones, and a legal officer whose primary task was to stamp impound orders on captured human cargo for investor confidence. The live feed was already pre-formatted with triumphant captions in 6 trade dialects. Human escorts, the packet said, were lightly armed relief guardians with predictable doctrine, reluctant escalation patterns, and political sensitivity to civilian losses. Fragmented colonial governance reduced response coherence. Estimated resistance window brief. Vec flicked his inner mandibles in satisfaction and opened channel to his strike chiefs. You will disable, not destroy, unless they force cost expansion. We are demonstrating market inevitability, not indulging violence. Capture control bridges intact for evidentiary effect. His weapons officer clicked assent. Screen elements report 3 human escorts near Depot Hadron Outer 7, 2 hospital tenders, and 12 registered aid haulers. They are forming a defensive arc. Expected, Vec said. Transmit surrender terms. Offer labor continuity contracts for crews. The terms went out in polished legal language wrapped around threat vectors. Human response arrived 23 seconds later. Captain Daniel Brooks, relief escort, resolute path, voice even and almost weary. Krellick's units at Hadron Outer 7. This is Human Convoy Command. You are operating under contested seizure authority pending tribunal review and in violation of documented humanitarian protections. Withdraw beyond relay marker 90 within 10 minutes and await neutral inspection. We are not surrendering civilian cargo. Vec smirked at the calm tone. Humans always sounded like this in his briefings, polite while losing ground. Signal him that his legal citations are void under current market updates. Begin approach. As Dividend Spear advanced, the human arc opened in the middle, like a gate yielding under pressure. 2 escorts pivoted and retreated along divergent vectors between broken relay trusses and dormant mass driver hulks left from an older mining era. Vec interpreted it as collapse and ordered pursuit with aggressive spacing, eager to keep the footage dramatic. Do not let them scatter. he told his wing captains. Drive through and pin them against the lattice. His navigation chief hesitated. Debris density is high in that channel. Fire control latency is climbing. Then compensate. They know local scrap better than we do. That is not genius, only familiarity. 3 Krellick screen ships entered the channel first, engines flaring against drifting steel ribs and shattered antenna frames. The humans kept withdrawing, never quite out of range, never committing to a broadside. Vec felt irritation, then contempt. A species that spoke in warnings and legal clauses, now running through junk. Then the first kinetic shear hit. It came from no obvious flagship, only converged trajectories from 3 vectors, timed to the same heartbeat. Tungsten slugs skipping off debris edges before correcting in microburst bursts. The lead screen cutter lost propulsion and spun into a relay spar. The second vanished behind a bloom of vented atmosphere. The third tried to roll clear and clipped a dead truss that tore half its sensor array away. Vec slammed a claw into his command rail. Source those batteries. Multiple signatures, Tactical replied, voice suddenly thin. Some are coming from the escorts, some from civilian hull profiles. We cannot cleanly classify. That should have been absurd. Civilian hull profiles did not produce synchronized kill geometry under debris interference, yet his display kept redrawing human icons as if they were changing jobs mid-engagement. A tug he had ignored 30 seconds earlier released a rack of guidance drones and began towing a wounded hauler behind cover. A hospital tender dumped thermal decoys, masking an escort's vector, while med crews continued triage broadcasts on open humanitarian bands. Freight modules detached, rotated, and became ammunition ferries feeding the human guns without exposing primary hulls. Vec felt, for the first time that day, the edge of uncertainty. This is staged, he muttered. They prepared this lane. His legal officer, pale beneath carapace sheen, whispered what none of them wanted said. Broker captain, Insurer Channel just flashed provisional suspension on combat coverage pending review of archive fraud allegations. For 1 second, Vec did not understand. Then the meaning landed like a hull breach. If coverage vanished, every ship loss became direct house liability, every munition expenditure a personal ruin for sponsoring syndicates. War was expensive. Uninsured war was extinction by arithmetic. Who filed suspension? Volari auditors and Lum scholars. Emergency credibility chain accepted by 3 neutral exchanges. The battlefield compressed around that realization. Vec had been sent to stage a profitable surrender under legal certainty. Instead, he was fighting in disputed status inside a trap designed to magnify navigation debt and timing errors, while his financial shield dissolved in real time. He opened a priority channel to Sector Command. Request reinforcement and legal clarification. Human forces are employing concealed support conversions and coordinated kinetics beyond assessed capability. Sector Command replied with clipped annoyance, then static, then a new order from higher up that sounded like denial wearing authority. Maintain pressure. Maintain. Their display is local and unsustainable. Capture depot assets. Market confidence requires visible compliance. Vec stared at the order for 2 beats, then obeyed, because Krellick's command culture treated hesitation as treason, and because pride is often strongest precisely when evidence turns against it. Reform screens, he barked. Push through channel beta. Carriers hold standoff and launch suppression drones. His ships advanced again, tighter this time, slower. Human escorts yielded another kilometer, drawing them deeper where debris vectors narrowed and firing solutions multiplied. On a private band, Brooks transmitted once more, still maddeningly calm. Krelix broker captain Jor Vek. You were warned at Concord. Withdraw now. Further advance will be met. Vek killed the channel. He speaks like he already won. Minutes later, 3 more Krelix screens went dark in less than 40 seconds, and the live broadcast drones that were meant to capture human surrender transmitted a different image across 6 sectors. Krelix formations bunching in confusion, while outnumbered relief escorts maneuvered with deliberate, practiced precision through a battlefield that had never been accidental. On the bridge of Resolute Path, Captain Daniel Brooks watched the Krelix formation tighten into a defensive knot and felt the battle change from pursuit to accounting. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Sophia Katerina, pulled up the same public feed the insurers were watching. Red legal overlays began appearing beside each Krelix hull designation, one after another, stamped by neutral exchanges that usually moved slower than geology. Pending review. Coverage suspended. Bond status contested. Dock privileges provisional. Brooks keyed a channel to the convoy net. All escorts maintain pressure lanes. No pursuit past marker 70. Keep them in the lattice and keep your telemetry clean. Every shot logged with time, vector, and warning chain. A tugmaster on auxiliary channel 3 answered first, voice rough with static and professional focus. Copy, Resolute. Tow Net 9 has 2 wounded haulers in shelter shadow. Drone racks reloading from freight pods. We can keep feeding your guns for another 20 minutes before heat limits. Good enough, Brooks said. 20 minutes is generous. Across the battle space, a Krelix cutter tried to break left through a corridor that looked open on old survey maps. It was open, physically. It was not open tactically. 2 human micro-tugs that had spent years dragging ore canisters for pennies shoved a dead antenna spine half a degree off drift, and the cutter's projected safe lane collapsed. Katerina did not even raise her voice. Now. 3 kinetic packets crossed at different speeds, corrected in flight by relay beacons hidden in what had looked like scrap. The cutter lost thrust and spun harmlessly into a debris pocket. No hull breach. No crew deaths detected. Just one more hostile ship out of the fight. Brooks allowed himself a thin line of humor that would have read as concerned anyone outside his profession. Someone should tell their investors this is still a humanitarian corridor. We are being extremely considerate. The first surprise had not been the guns. It had been jurisdiction used like weather control. In Concord, 3 light minutes away by relay lag but synchronized through mirrored legal nodes, Marcus Volkov stood in the compliance vault with half the chamber's emergency staff crowded behind transparent partitions. He had not left his console in 9 hours. Preceptor Hal and Aaron Soul stood beside him, lending witness authority each time his team pushed a new evidentiary block into the exchanges. Node Casterline accepted chain integrity, an analyst said. Now provinces accepted provisional nullification of Krelix collateral claims. 2 neutral dock unions just suspended service to any League vessel lacking independent bond. Volkov did not celebrate. He shifted the next package into queue and checked signatures twice. Push package 17. Include Sam's open session seizure order and refusal of humanitarian carve-out. Tag it as extortionary conduct under emergency conventions. Hal's hand hovered over the authorization prism. You are turning law into battlespace architecture. Volkov met his gaze without looking away from the feed. The Krelix did that first. We are restoring gravity. On the wall display, the Hadron engagement updated in near real time. Every time a Krelix ship fired without verified coverage, its risk marker darkened. Every time a human vessel transmitted warning protocol before firing, the marker beside it brightened with compliance credit. Neutral algorithms that had ignored human complaints for decades now weighed behavior line by line because the fraud proof made inaction more expensive than attention. Aaron's soul watched a cluster of yellow icons flare over 3 Krelix carriers. Their munition contracts are keyed to insurer bonds, she said softly. If coverage remains suspended, some launch systems will refuse release to avoid void liabilities. Volkov nodded once. That was always the pressure point. They made war dependent on paperwork and called it efficiency. In the chamber above them, emergency clerks who had once treated human motions as procedural background now requested Earth's legal templates by priority channel. Admiral Kashif transmitted formal witness endorsements to 12 patrol groups. Lum scholars published the first authenticated treaty mirrors to public archival mirrors beyond Krellick's rewrite reach. The feed metrics climbed so quickly that even the cynical commentators stopped calling it theater and started calling it precedent. At Hadron, precedent arrived as silence where missiles should have been. Broker Captain Jorvek bared his inner mandibles in disbelief as his tactical board flagged 8 failed launches across 2 screen wings. Not misfires, contract lockouts, smart ordnance acknowledging command authority, then halting at safeties because battlefield bond verification had dropped below threshold. His weapons chief struck the console with a palm claw and reran authentication. Command keys valid. Magazine pressure nominal. We are being blocked by liability protocols. Override them. House-grade munitions do not permit full override without insurer indemnity. The chief swallowed hard. We can still fire unguided kinetics and shipboard beams, but our precision envelope is degrading. Vec opened a direct line to sector arbitration and received a Q notice. Q notice. In active combat. When an arbiter finally came through, the voice was clipped and remote, as if discussing dock fees. Broker Captain, exchanges have not revoked your rights. They have suspended confidence pending tribunal review. Continue operations prudently. Losses incurred under provisional status remain sponsor exposed. Sponsor exposed, Vec repeated, each syllable a fracture. We were ordered to produce decisive compliance footage. Then produce it at acceptable risk. The channel closed. His navigator pulled up a new overlay and went still. Captain, neutral beacons are reclassifying this lane as contested humanitarian space under live review. Additional force here may trigger multilateral penalties. Vec forced himself to breathe evenly. Krellick's command training taught that panic was a cost multiplier. It did not teach what to do when the market itself started blinking red around your fleet. On the main display, human-civilian hulls kept changing function with unnerving calm. A refinery skiff became a shield tug. A medical tender, still broadcasting patient stats on open bands, deployed decoy buoys that drew fire away from 2 evac barges. Freight pallets jettisoned in ordered strings became impromptu sensor screens. Nothing flashy, nothing mythic. Just a civilization that had practiced adaptation until it looked routine. 3 minutes later, his comm officer whispered, "Incoming from Human Convoy Command. Priority open band." Brooks appeared on split screen, face lit by amber console glow, expression almost courteous. Broker Captain Vec, this is your 2nd operational warning at Hadron Outer 7. Your legal coverage is under suspension in 6 sectors. Your seizure authority is contested by authenticated treaty mirrors, now in public chain. You are advancing inside a declared humanitarian corridor while refusing neutral inspection. Withdraw to marker 90 and stand by. If you continue, we will continue to disable your ships with minimum necessary force. We are not discussing this again. Vec leaned toward the pickup. You hide behind clerks and hospital paint. Brooks' reply stayed level. We hide behind nothing. You mistook restraint for incapacity. Correct your chart. The channel cut. 11 minutes into the engagement, the tide shifted from uncertain to measurable. Not because the Krellicks had been destroyed. They had not. They still held heavier hulls and enough firepower to make every human captain in the lane sweat through their uniforms. The shift came because initiative moved. Krellick's pushes became reactions. Human movements set tempo. Every attempted surge by Vex screens triggered prepared responses, and each response generated clean legal telemetry that further tightened the noose around League credibility. On Resolute Path, Katerina highlighted an incoming data burst from Concord. Compliance update. 34 exchanges now recognize provisional nullification of seizure warrants tied to Earth non-sovereignty claim. 4 more pending. Brooks allowed himself one short nod. Forward to every civilian hull. They need to know the law is catching up to the fight. A chorus of acknowledgments rolled through the net. Freight captains and tug crews speaking in accents from 3 worlds, none of them sounding heroic, all of them steady. The convoy had been built for famine relief and disaster triage. Today it had become a logistics organism under fire, and it was learning in public. Across the debris field, Vec watched one of his subordinate captains break formation and retreat without authorization toward relay marker 88. Pride demanded he order immediate discipline fire. Arithmetic argued otherwise. He opened a private channel instead. Captain Rule, explain. Rule's voice arrived tight with controlled fear. My sponsor house just transmitted lost ceiling. They will disavow any hull destroyed under suspended coverage. I will not bankrupt my crew families to satisfy a broadcast script. That answer would have been unthinkable yesterday. Today, it spread through Vex Bridge like a contaminant. The internal conflict finally breached Command Veneer. His legal officer argued for immediate standoff to preserve claims. His operations chief demanded renewed assault before humans tightened the trap further. His sensor team reported unidentified data pings beyond the outer debris ring, low signature, intermittent, too disciplined to be random. Vec did not like unknowns. He liked margins, predictable surrender curves, and opponents who flinched when told the market had spoken. The market was now speaking in contradictory voices, and the humans were exploiting every syllable. He switched to encrypted fleet-wide command, choosing words that preserved authority while conceding reality. All Krellick's elements execute regroup pattern Kappa inside shielded arc, maintain mutual support, conserve precision munitions, screen for external interference, and prepare for controlled withdrawal if sector command fails to restore full bond status within 10 minutes. This is a tactical reset, not retreat. No one challenged him openly. That almost made it worse. As his ships pulled inward, human fire eased by exactly the amount needed to keep pressure without provoking a blind charge. Vec recognized the professionalism and hated it because contempt had been easier when humans played the role assigned to them. On Concord's upper tier, High Commander Sam received the Hadron feed with delayed packet jitter and listened to his staff insist that Vec simply needed firmer orders. Behind him, market officers kept issuing bulletins about temporary volatility and confidence management, as though language could outpace loss curves. Sam's primary analyst projected a comparison graph and swallowed before speaking. Commander, human legal strike teams have invalidated 27% of our active collateral claims in under 2 hours. If this trend holds, 3 major houses will breach debt covenants by next cycle. Sam's carapace plates clicked, once sharply. Then they will stop breaching by winning at Hadron. Respectfully, sir, Hadron may no longer be solvable by local tonnage. Their documentation cascade is turning neutral infrastructure against us. Sam turned to the main display where Brooks' warning replayed without drama, and where Krellick's screenships, symbols of market inevitability, were now orbiting defensively inside a human-built kill geometry made of debris, tug vectors, and legal timestamps. Dispatch second broker group from Gallus. Sam ordered. Tell them to bypass insurer channels and load House Reserve Ordnance. His analyst hesitated. Unbonded deployment will trigger automatic sanctions. Sam's voice dropped into something colder than anger. Sanctions are tomorrow's concern if we lose authority today. Move them. Back at Hadron, Vec received the order burst and closed his eyes for one measured breath. Reinforcement meant commitment. Commitment meant doubling down under collapsing assumptions. Yet withdrawal without relief would brand him, the captain, who blinked first against erased people who refused to stay erased. He reopened CommandNet. Kappa formation holds, we by the window. Around him, damaged cutters rotated into a defensive spindle while engineering teams rerouted power and med crews treated concussed gunners in strapped crash seats. Human escorts mirrored the movement at distance, patient as debt collectors, while far beyond the immediate engagement zone, those unidentified pings flickered again in disciplined patterns, like a door being tested from the other side. The Krelliks had not broken yet. They had, however, stopped believing their own briefing packets, and that was the first fracture that mattered. That first fracture widened faster than any Krellik's risk model could smooth. The unidentified pings beyond Hadron's debris ring resolved into a lattice of tiny transponder buoys, each one low power, passive, and legally registered months earlier as navigation safety markers for civilian relief traffic. Taken alone, they were forgettable. Taken together, they formed a precision timing grid that fed targeting corrections, tow vectors, and collision forecasts to every human hull in the corridor without exposing a single command ship to direct fire. Broker Captain Jor Vec stared at the pattern and understood with rising dread that he had not been lured into a local trap. He had entered infrastructure. On Resolute Path, Lieutenant Sophia Katerina brought up the same mesh in pale blue lines that crossed the debris field like quiet handwriting. Grid is stable, she said. Auxiliary beacons synced through civil relay codes, tug chains requesting permission to initiate phase shift. Brooks gave the order at once. Approved. Shift to continuity mesh doctrine. Keep the hospital tenders behind shield profile 3. I want 2 drone ferries to each escort and continuous evac lanes for any crew that bails out, Krelliks included. Across 32 channels, acknowledgments came from people who did not wear uniforms, but moved with military precision all the same. Tug captains adjusted thrust in measured bursts that nudged dead mass into defensive screens. Freight pilots detached modular cargo blocks and converted them into mobile repair magazines. Medical crews on the tenders stabilized both human and captured Krelliks casualties, while their hulls ran decoy signatures and signal amplification for combat telemetry. The convoy stopped looking like a line of ships and began to resemble an organism. By the 3rd hour of the Hadron action, that organism had grown beyond the battle zone. Ingrid Bergman watched it happen from Operations Vault 7 beneath Concord, where the main wall display tracked 6 sectors at once. Every time a Krellik seizure warrant collapsed under Volkov's evidentiary strikes, a civilian port that had hesitated an hour earlier reopened for human-tagged aid traffic. Every reopened port became a node. Every node increased range, repair cadence, and fuel depth. Mesh completion at 48%, Bergman said, her voice carrying to Morrison and Catherine Hayes, without any triumph in it. At 60, we can sustain 3 active engagements and 2 relief surges simultaneously. At 70, their hub dependence becomes a liability curve, not a force multiplier. Morrison folded her arms and studied the Krelliks movement tracks clustering around sanctioned market hubs that were now darkening one by one. Their doctrine assumes centralized certainty, she said. No certainty, no tempo. No tempo, no intimidation. Volkov did not look up from his legal feed. Emergency ruling from Null Exchange just hit. Unbonded Krelix combat deployment now triggers automatic docking denial in 14 neutral stations. They can still fight. They just cannot recover cheaply. In the chamber above, delegates who had dismissed humanity as overextended subcontractors now watched a live strategic map where human capabilities seemed to multiply every 10 minutes. The map did not show secret superweapons. It showed disciplined integration, law-shaping access, logistics shaping endurance, endurance shaping combat choices. Admiral Keshef leaned toward her aide and spoke under breath. They built warfighting depth out of civilian trust networks, she said. How long has that existed? Her aide replied, equally quiet. Evidence suggests decades, hidden in plain sight as disaster response planning. Sam received the same data on Ledger Crown and rejected it with anger first, then with operational edits. He called in his analysts, demanded revised confidence bands, and ordered Gallus reinforcement groups to accelerate toward Hadron with House Reserve Ordnance and emergency fuel compression. His staff obeyed, but their replies kept arriving with caveats. 2 refit stations had denied emergency docking. A third accepted passage, but refused munitions loading under contested liability law. One House sponsor transmitted a direct request for indemnity guarantees before committing additional carriers. Sam struck the command rail hard enough to silence the bridge. Guarantees are for peacetime arbitration. We are preserving market sovereignty. Tell them history is written by those who keep control. His primary analyst held steady despite the pressure. Commander, that premise is now under active dispute in every council node. If Hadron drags, the legal contagion reaches the archive spindle itself. Sam's antennae angled forward, predatory and cold. Then, we end Hadron quickly and reassert authority at the spindle before their auditors arrive. At Hadron, Vec attempted exactly what Sam demanded. He compressed his defensive spindle and pushed a concentrated strike package toward Depot Outer 7, hoping massed force could still rupture the human screen. It nearly worked for 40 seconds. 2 Krelix cutters broke through the first drone cordon and burned toward the depot's docking spine. Then the human mesh flexed. Not panicked, not loud, just precise. A refinery skiff that should have been irrelevant swung in on pre-plotted thrust and deployed a tow net that fouled one cutter's maneuver fins without puncturing the hull. A hospital tender flashed emergency beacons to force deconfliction protocols and opened a lane for evac pods. Resolute Path and 2 escort corvettes put thruster-kill rounds into the second cutter, leaving it tumbling, but intact. Vec shouted for renewed fire support and received a report that chilled his bridge more than any hit. Broker Captain, his comm officer said, Gallus Reinforcement Group has reduced speed. They report fuel uncertainty and incomplete resupply certification. 2 captains request written protection against sponsor liability before entering contested zone. Denied, Vec snapped. Transmit direct command authority. Already transmitted. They acknowledge and continue at reduced burn. He looked back at the tactical board where human and civilian icons kept moving in coordinated patterns no privateer simulator had predicted. For the first time in his career, he understood that his opponent's center of gravity was not a flagship he could destroy. It was a social contract he could not reach with guns. Morrison addressed that contract an hour later in a fleet-wide broadcast routed through every human military channel, every registered civilian aid frequency, and every Allied witness node that requested relay. Her image appeared on bridges, in cargo bays, at triage stations, in council booths, and on more than one Krelix command screen because interception discipline had already frayed. For 3 centuries, she said, voice calm and unadorned, we have been patient. We signed charters others ignored when convenient. We escorted neutral shipping through pirate weather and radiation storms because somebody had to keep lanes open. We accepted insult when insult was cheaper than escalation. That patience was not weakness. It was a choice in favor of stability. Today, the Krelix League targeted refugee lifelines and falsified history to justify theft. They chose predation over order. We are now choosing correction. You will hold fire discipline. You will protect non-combatants, including enemy crews who surrender or become disabled. You will log every action because truth is part of this battle space. We are not here to erase a people. We are here to end a method. Stay steady. Stay lawful. Finish the work. No applause followed. Channels filled instead with confirmations, request codes, casualty updates, and convoy routing adjustments from thousands of people acting on the same frame. Catherine Hayes listened from the council consultation rail, while Preceptor Hal and Aaron Saul stood on either side of her, each fielding rapid inquiries from delegates who suddenly wanted to co-sponsor emergency archival safeguards. A junior clerk from a neutral block approached Catherine with visible uncertainty. "Ambassador," the clerk said, "my delegation asks whether Earth intends retaliatory seizure against Krelix civilian worlds if military judgment goes in your favor." Catherine answered without delay. "No starvation policy. No collective punishment. Command-level accountability, infrastructure safeguards, and verified restitution mechanisms. Record that exactly." The clerk blinked once, then bowed and transmitted. That message moved through the chamber almost as quickly as the battle feeds. It unsettled some delegates more than threats would have. Species accustomed to coercion understood coercion. Deliberate restraint after provocation required a different kind of power. At Hadron, fear changed shape inside the Krelix formation. It was no longer fear of destruction alone. It was fear that the old intimidation tools had stopped working. Crews on damaged screen ships began requesting evacuation corridors rather than last stand directives. Two captains transmitted conditional surrender pings, then full surrender beacons when human tugs approached, under white-coated rescue tags instead of finishing shots. Human mid-teams boarded one crippled Krelix cutter and stabilized its engine fire while disarming weapon locks, then transferred injured gunners to a tender that had treated human refugees the same day. The footage reached every channel. Vec watched it and felt command authority slipping between his claws. He called Sector Command for guidance and received a compressed packet from Sam himself. "Hold line. Reinforcements en route. Prepare coordinated surge at my mark. Archive spindle status remains secure. Human legal aggression will be reversed by decisive market action." Vec read it twice. The phrase that mattered was secure. If Sam was emphasizing the spindle, he was worried about it. On Concord, Volkov proved that worry warranted. He stepped into the emergency session with exhausted eyes and a stack of authenticated chain reports that made procedural staff fall silent before he spoke. "Krelix Registrar contamination traces converge on archive spindle route authority," he said. "Not rumor, not inference. Direct routing evidence. If those route chains remain under League control, they can keep seeding altered history into vulnerable nodes faster than we can litigate reversals." Hal raised his translator to chamber gain. "The scholars of LUM concur. Spindle access must be secured under multinational supervision, or no record remains trustworthy." Sam objected instantly by live link, voice sharpened to a blade. "The spindle is sovereign commercial infrastructure. Any approach by human forces constitutes civilizational piracy and declaration of unrestricted war." Kesh of Thel replied before the clerk could intervene. "You declared unrestricted predation when you erased a charter species and seized refugee food. Your warnings are late." The emergency docket moved to vote under accelerated conflict procedure. One by one, blocks that had spent years hedging around Krelix influence signaled support for Provisional Intervention Authority tied to archival preservation and humanitarian defense. Not all supported Earth. Enough did. In Hadron's debris haze, the tactical reality shifted at last from contested control to human command of pace. Gallus reinforcements arrived in fragments, late and fuel-thin, then halted when they found not a collapsing relief convoy, but layered human formations anchored by civilian support webs and backed by newly legal Allied patrol presence at the lane perimeter. They did not charge. They asked for updated orders and held distance. Brooks saw the hesitation and opened a broadband transmission to all Krellick's hulls in theater. "This is Captain Daniel Brooks, acting under Earth Command Corrective Authority and Council witnessed humanitarian mandate. You are directed to power down heavy weapons and proceed to inspection anchorages at markers 90 through 94. Crews that comply will receive medical treatment, life support, and eventual repatriation review under biometric disarmament protocol. Command-level personnel tied to archival fraud and seizure directives will be detained for tribunal transfer. You have 10 minutes to choose." Vac received that message while staring at his dwindling munitions, his sponsor liability alerts, and the surrender beacons already blinking among his own outer screens. He could continue, lose most of his force, and still fail to reopen the corridor. Or he could preserve crews and face disgrace under a command structure that might not survive the week. He made the only decision left that still belonged to him. "All Krellick's elements under my tactical control," he said on encrypted net, voice flat with contained ruin. "Execute controlled ceasefire and shift to inspection anchorages as directed. Destroy no records. Scuttle no hulls. Medical priority to severe casualties. This order stands." Some captains obeyed at once. Others delayed for several long breaths, then followed when human rail batteries painted their hulls without firing. Across the field, engines cooled, weapon signatures fell, and rescue traffic replaced attack vectors. Morrison watched the transition from Concord and did not exhale until Katerina's confirmation came through in clear text. Hadron stabilized. Corridor secure. Non-combatant flow restoring. Then a second report arrived, and the room tightened again in a different direction. Sam had withdrawn Ledger Crown and his remaining core escorts from Concord's immediate jurisdiction envelope and set direct course for the archive spindle, transmitting emergency authority claims to every Krellick's house still loyal enough to answer. Along 3 approach corridors, scattered League elements were already vectoring to join him. Morrison turned to Catherine and Volkov. "He is consolidating at the root node. He knows this is over unless he keeps the forge." Catherine met her gaze. "Then we finish where he started." Beyond Hadron, around dead moons and quiet yards that official registries still labeled decommissioned, long-dormant human reserve hulls, powered up in disciplined silence and slid into formation on vectors that converged without hurry and without ambiguity toward the archive spindle. The first reserve wall appeared on Sam's tactical board as a sensor anomaly, then as mass, then as doctrine. Around the archive spindle, dead moons that had carried decommission registries for 20 years opened their silent docks and released human hulls in disciplined files, gunmetal wedges, and carrier blocks with old serial numbers and fresh thermal signatures. They did not rush. They took stations along 3 approach corridors and linked to the continuity mesh as if they had been in theater all week. Sam watched the geometry close and felt the room on Ledger Crown turn from confidence to calculation. "Identity confirmation," he snapped. His analyst answered with a dry mouth and steady tone. "Reserve fleets, verified human command keys. Estimated tonnage exceeds prior council declarations by a factor of 3.2. Additional logistics hulls are reconfiguring behind them. Their support depth is rising while ours is fixed." Sam's carapace clicked once. Broadcast total mobilization claim and unrestricted defense authority. Every loyal house converges on spindle defense vectors now. A market officer hesitated. Unrestricted declarations under suspended confidence may trigger permanent charter sanctions across neutral exchanges. Sam rounded on him. If we lose the spindle, sanctions will be a historical footnote attached to our collapse. Transmit. Across the void, Admiral Elena Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Aegis Continuance and reviewed a battle space that looked less like a front line and more like an ecosystem. Rail platforms hid behind moonshadow. Drone tow clusters waited along rescue lanes. Civilian convoys sat under shielded escort arcs with medical tags bright and unmistakable. Volkov's compliance teams rode with cyber detachments aboard 2 signal ships, ready to strike registrar routes the moment boarding teams breached core vaults. Catherine Hayes appeared on central display from Concord, flanked by Preceptor Hal and Aaron Saul as co-witnesses under emergency charter seal. Her voice held formal gravitas without ornament. Council Accelerated Mandate is now active. Earth Command is authorized to secure archive spindle route chains for preservation, terminate fraudulent overwrite pathways, and neutralize coercive fleet action. Humanity remains bound by non-combatant protections and surrender protocols. This record is live to all nodes. Morrison inclined her head. Mandate received. Witness chain acknowledged. Then she opened fleet-wide channel. Human and Krelix frequencies both. For 3 centuries, we have been patient under insult because trade stability fed worlds that had no part in elite rivalry. We hoped the League would reverse course once exposed. You did not. You erased peoples on paper and called it order. You seized refugee food and called it collateral. Hear this clearly. Our objective is not extermination, not plunder, not revenge economics. Our objective is to end predatory authority at its source and restore a lawful record no house can forge. Power down and submit to inspection, and your crews live to go home. Use civilians as shields, and we will remove the civilians first, then remove your guns. Distort history again, and every verified node in this galaxy will lock you out. You chose poorly. We are now correcting the choice. Sam cut into the channel before surrender pings could spread. Primitive species mistake temporary luck for structural power. You are labor stock wearing uniforms, inheritors of tools you barely comprehend. The spindle belongs to those who built markets from chaos. Approach and be priced as pirates, every one of you. We will break your hulls and relist your worlds by sunset cycle. Morrison closed her microphone and nodded to Tactical. Layer 1. Volkov's teams struck first. Not fireworks, not cinematic code storms, just synchronized intrusions through legal maintenance ports the Krelix had left open for speed. Registrar relays between Spindle and League command market hubs went dark 1 spine at a time. Billing authentication stalled. Munitions release approvals lagged. Shipboard arbiters that once provided instant indemnity began returning contested status loops. Krelix formation chatter thickened with failed confirmations and rerouting demands. Command market links severed across 48%, Volkov reported from signal ship Meridian Proof. 71 and climbing. Root node isolation in progress. Layer 2, Morrison said. Human long-range rail batteries fired from Moonshadow in staggered cadence, each salvo timed against Spindle's rotation and debris drift. They did not go for core kills. They went for mobility and field control. The first pattern pinned 3 Krelix carriers into overlapping dead zones where their own bulk blocked clean firing lines. The second pattern stripped maneuver authority from 2 escort wings by hammering thruster assemblies and vector fins. The third drew a bright boundary around civilian traffic lanes and punished any weapon signature that crossed it. On Ledger Crown, alarms stacked faster than triage could clear. Sam saw carrier icons flashing amber and roared for breakout lanes. 4. Then, he saw Morrison's predicted move reflected in his own order queue. Human rail timing had forced his ships inward, exactly where he had meant to mass for counterpunch. "Deploy collateral ring," he ordered. "Push impounded barges between us and their batteries. Make them choose." Krellick's tugs shoved civilian barges forward, patched hulls full of seized food, medicine, and evac shelters from the outer enclaves. Their transponders still carried refugee registries and childcare designations. On human channels, bridge crews fell silent for one tight beat. Morrison did not. "Rescue Protocol Delta," she said. "Brooks, you own the extraction corridor. All rail groups shift to thruster kill precision only. Nobody fires through a barge silhouette." "Understood," Brooks replied from Resolute Path, now attached to Spindle Assault Group 3. "Townet's out. Drone ferries. Follow my vector and trust your math." The next 6 minutes became choreography under stress. Human drones shot ahead in fan patterns and latched magnetic tow lines onto drifting barges while escorts used pinpoint shots to disable Krellick's tug thrusters without breaching pressure hulls. 2 barges spun off-axis. Tug crews from 3 civilian species counterpulled them into safety lanes. A Krellick's gunship tried to hide behind a medical convoy and lost power to a single kinetic strike that punched its engine bell and nothing else. Med teams on Tender Mercy Field took over barge life support the moment they crossed rescue markers. Sam watched his shield strategy dissolve into footage of humans saving the hostages he had weaponized. "Why are they still holding fire on kill shots?" one of his gunnery chiefs whispered. "Because they wanted the record clean," Sam thought, and hated the answer. "Layer 3, Morrison said. Assault shuttles dropped from reserve carriers in tight stacks and burned for spindle docking crowns under rail umbrella. Commander Adrian Novak led the first breaching wave with mixed teams: human marines, LUM archival technicians, and Volari chain auditors in armored witness rigs. They hit Dock Ring C through F within 90 seconds, cut through security bulkheads, and split by objective. Marines went for command pathways and reactor safeguards. LUM teams went for root vault integrity. Volari auditors seeded immutable mirror bursts to every council node that would accept live evidence. Inside the spindle, resistance was sharp but fragmented. Krellick security units fought in corridor knots, then withdrew when pressure doors began failing around them and their own command updates contradicted one another. Novak kept his orders clipped and repetitive. Stun and bypass when possible. Secure, do not scorch. We need the records intact. At Vault Axis 9, Preceptor Hal's junior scholar, Liar N, pressed old LUM keys against new Krellick's locks while rounds snapped down the corridor behind a marine shield wall. The vault opened on the 3rd sequence. What appeared was not treasure but index truth. Treaty chains, first contact signatures, transit covenants, each one overwritten with Krellick's revision layers that now sat exposed like bad paint. Liar N transmitted the first restored block to Concord. Hal's voice, thin with emotion but technically precise, came back over secure link. Authenticity confirmed. Publish immediately. Across the galaxy, the feed hit public nodes in a single wave. Earth's name reappeared on maps as verified sovereign origin, not as petition, but as recovered fact. The moment it propagated, neutral systems began restoring docking rights and transit protections automatically. Krellick's coercive claims detached like dead circuitry. 47 minutes after the first rail salvo, surrender beacons outnumbered active Krellick's weapon signatures around the spindle. Ledger Crown tried to break right and was pinned by 2 reserve cruisers that sacrificed their own firing solutions to block escape vector alignment. Sam cursed them as amateurs until he realized the maneuver had closed his last clear lane to open space. He ordered a full burn anyway. A human shot took his starboard drive cluster cleanly and left the flagship drifting, armed, but trapped. "Transfer me to the spindle command deck," he said, each word carved. "I will not be captured on this bridge." He arrived to find his remaining guard cadre sealing blast doors and setting hardpoints for a final stand. Outside, decompression warnings flashed in orange as a human breaching charge blew a service lock on the lower ring and vented 2 empty admin corridors. Air pressure on command deck began to fall by increments. Novak's voice came through the bulkhead speaker. "Hi, Commander Sam, this deck is surrounded. You are cut off from fleet control. You will vent if these seals fail. Drop weapons, cycle your guards to masks, and step away from command rail. You are under detention by council mandate." One guard looked at Sam, then at the pressure gauge dropping toward emergency threshold. Another unclipped his rifle and set it down without ceremony. Sam hissed at them. "Cowards." The oldest guard met his gaze and spoke with exhausted clarity. "We signed for commerce security, not death for falsified books." One by one, weapons clattered to the floor. The inner hatch blew inward on shaped bolts, and Morrison stepped through with 2 Marines and a restraint unit, helmet off, expression unchanged except for the fatigue around her eyes. She looked at the dropped rifles first, then at Sam, who stood rigid at the command rail with fractured rank chains hanging crooked across his armor. Across his magnetic restraints locked around his upper limbs with a heavy click. Sam leaned forward as far as the restraints allowed and spat the last shard of contempt he had left. "You are still primitives with better guns." Morrison held his stare, voice low enough that everyone on the deck had to choose to listen. "No, Commander. We are archivists with a longer memory." For the first time since Concord, Sam had no immediate reply. He looked past her at the tactical repeater on the wall. Every line showed the same verdict: surrendered, disabled, or detained. Novak signaled secure status. "Command deck under control. Route chain mirrors complete. Reactor stable. No civilian casualties inside objective ring." Morrison keyed command net. "All groups cease offensive fire. Transition to recovery, medical support, and detainee processing. Preserve every data core. This operation is now evidence management." Outside, the battle collapsed into aftermath discipline. Human tugs ferried damaged Krellick ships to inspection anchorages. Med shuttles crossed old battle lines without escort challenge. Volkov's teams sealed fraudulent registrar pathways and marked them for tribunal review instead of deletion, preserving proof. Catherine's office transmitted detention authorities under council seal with Thel and Lum co-signature, closing the jurisdictional loopholes Sam had exploited for years. Sam was marched through the Spindle's central transit spine as live feeds followed, not for spectacle but for record integrity. Delegates who had once watched Earth erased now watched the architect of that erasure, bound and catalogued under law he could not edit. At the transfer dock, Thel marshals waited beside a nullcom transport whose hull carried no insignia except tribunal authority. A marshal read the custody notice in full, each charge precise. "High Commander Sam of the Krellick's Merchant League, you are remanded under emergency charter for archival fraud, piracy, extortionary seizure of humanitarian assets, and command responsibility in mass casualty coercion attempts. You will be held in communication isolated detention pending public tribunal." Sam lifted his head, carapace dulled by deck dust and defeat. "I reject your jurisdiction." The marshal's mandibles shifted in what might have been grim amusement. "Jurisdiction has already accepted you." They sealed him into the transport cell. Magnetic locks nested, null field active. When the transport lifted away from the spindle, no Krellick ship moved to intercept. There were none left willing, and none left able. The nullcom transport carrying Sam had barely cleared the spindle perimeter when the first revenge petitions hit Earth Command. Some came from human colony councils that had lost crews to Krellic seizures. Some came from neutral blocks demanding exemplary punishment to deter copycats. A few were blunt market proposals to let Krellic civilian worlds starve under lawful sanctions until every debt was paid in fear. Admiral Elena Morrison read them from a temporary command dais set up inside Spindle Dock Ring C, where the deck still smelled of hot metal, antiseptic, and recycled air from emergency scrubbers. Around her, recovery teams moved with methodical urgency. Krellic's prisoners sat in ordered rows, wrists in magnetic cuffs calibrated for circulation safety, each one tagged for medical scan before interrogation. No one was struck, no one was paraded, and no one was denied water. Broker Captain Jorvek sat among them with a pressure bandage around one arm, watching a human medic adjust a respirator mask on one of his gunners before checking a human deckhand for smoke inhalation. The same hands, the same tools, the same triage priority board. Captain Daniel Brooks stepped up beside Morrison, helmet under his arm, voice low. Legal confirms we could freeze all outbound food contracts to 5 Krellic's core worlds by morning cycle. Perfectly lawful under emergency restitution. Morrison did not look away from the triage floor. Lawful is not sufficient. Strategic is not sufficient. We are ending predation, not inheriting it. She opened a command-wide channel, then a second to the Council emergency docket so every delegate could hear the order in real time. Earth Command Directive, effective immediately. No retaliatory starvation operations against Krellic civilian populations. Repeat, no collective deprivation. Establish protected food and medical corridors under multinational escort, supervised by Thel inspectors, LUM auditors, and volunteer convoy masters from former Krellic's client species. Captured command-level personnel remain for tribunal, or line crews are processed, disarmed biometrically, and repatriated on verified schedules. Archive recovery teams will restore non-combatant Krellic's cultural records damaged during internal purge operations. Accountability is mandatory. Vengeance economics is denied. In Concord, the chamber that had listened to Earth's erasure now listened to Earth refuse the easiest cruelty. The silence that followed was not disbelief this time. It was recalibration. Counselor Erin Soule, who had held herself rigid through the first session, finally answered the question Catherine Hayes had never forced. At Concord, when I remained still, my staff thought I was choosing neutrality, she said into open record. I was deciding whether we still believed our own principles. This order answers that for all of us. 3 days after the Spindle operation, the tribunal opened on Thel's judicial moon in a hall built without ornament and without blind corners. The proceedings were public by mandate and mirrored live to every major node. Preceptor Hal entered carrying the old crystalline spindle in both hands, its right-locked facets catching hard white light. Volkov followed with the sealed evidence case Catherine had carried into the chamber after Earth was erased. The case was opened on record. Inside were the La Mirror treaties, Valari transit charters, registrar path analyses, and the first chain signatures Sam's offices had corrupted. Every physical item was tagged, scanned, and entered into the continuity ledger with custody trails visible to all observers. Hal formally transferred the spindle from emergency witness custody to permanent joint stewardship under LUM, Valeri, and Earth Verification Authority. Erin Saul filed the Valeri originals into the same vault and retained authenticated mirrors for her own people, closing the loop Sam had tried to exploit. Sam stood in magnetic restraints at the center rail, carapace dulled, rank chains removed. Around him sat not enemies, but judges from 7 species and legal monitors from 12 neutral blocks. Vec testified first about Hadron orders, insurer lockouts, and the command packet that told him to hold line after seizure, authority collapsed. Captain Rule testified after him, voice shaking only once, confirming sponsor threats against crew families and the pressure to stage surrender footage regardless of civilian risk. The live feed included Sam's own Concord declarations and his spindle order deploying impounded barges as shields. When the presiding justice asked for final statement, Sam lifted his head and looked at the audience he once treated as market inventory. "I surrender jurisdiction." The presiding justice of Thel answered without heat. "Jurisdiction remembers you." Sentence followed exactly as charged. Permanent incarceration on Thel's Nullcom prison moon, no command contact, no market access, no historical edit authority ever again. His transfer order was signed by all 7 judges. By the second week of adjudication, the council convened in full session to draft what every delegate now called the Charter of Continuity. Catherine stood with Morrison, Volkov, Howe, Aaron Soule, and Admiral Kesh at the central rail while clerks projected the final clauses over the chamber void where Earth's marker had once been deleted with a soft completion tone. Clause 1 made archival tampering a civilization-level crime with automatic emergency jurisdiction. Clause 2 established distributed mirror custody across species lines so no single empire could rewrite origin records. Clause 3 tied insurance legitimacy to verified historical chains, ending the Krelix method of forging reality for profit. Clause 4 required humanitarian carve-outs in all sanctioned conflicts, enforceable by patrol and audit, not goodwill. When voting opened, lights rose tier by tier until the chamber glowed almost entirely green. Dissent remained. It was logged. It no longer ruled. Krelix merchant houses were then called one by one for dissolution hearings. Some executives attempted old bargaining language, offering tariff concessions in exchange for amnesty. It failed. Their raiding fleets were dismantled under inspection, hulls cut down into civilian freight cooperatives with external oversight boards staffed by former client species. Command-level war criminals stayed in detention. Ordinary crews returned home under biometric disarmament accords and monitored service bans. The outcome was punitive where it needed to be and surgical where it could be. On Spindle Dock, Ring C, Brooks supervised one of the first repatriation transfers. Vec stood at the boarding line, wrists free now, implant seal visible at the base of his neck, medical clearance in hand. "You will have escort to the exchange corridor," Brooks said. "Your crew manifest matches. 2 of your injured stay another day for lung repair." Vec hesitated, mandibles tight. "You could have broken our worlds." Brooks checked the final signature and passed him the slate. "We had no shortage of options. We chose one you can live with." Vec gave a short, stunned nod and led his people up the ramp without another word. 7 years later, a school dome on Carrot Station rotated through simulated dawn, while children from 4 species clustered around a restored star map projected at waist height. The station had once been a Krelix debt port, where maps omitted Earth and contracts taught that some peoples were annotations, not nations. The old overlays were gone now, preserved only in legal museums and cautionary curricula. Convoy Master Sophia Katerina, retired from line combat and wearing civilian gray with an Earth transit pin, tapped the projection and expanded a corridor from Sul to Hadron to Karad. The route glowed steady blue. That line stayed open during the ration winter, she told them. Not because anyone was generous by instinct, because systems were built, audited, and defended by people who decided records were not merchandise. A small Valeri student raised a hand. "Is it true Earth was removed from all maps?" "It is true someone tried," Katerina said. "It lasted less than a war." Another child, Krelix this time, looked down at the map and then back up. Why did humans send food to my world after the trials? Katerina considered him for a moment, then answered with the same plain precision that had once guided railfire through debris and fear. Because punishment and hunger are different tools. We needed one. We refused the other. Outside the dome, a convoy departed the station ring in disciplined formation. Human freighters, Thel patrol escorts, Valari audit cutters, Lum archive tenders, and cooperative Krelix cargo hulls, marked with new registry codes and old scars. No ship moved by permission of a single market house anymore. They moved under a framework that assumed memory could be attacked, and therefore had to be defended together. In Concord, the central map still rotated beneath the dark crystal vault. Earth's marker remained bright, not enlarged, not embellished, simply present and verified. Beside it, in smaller script visible only when the display zoomed to legal layer depth, sat a standing notation drafted by unanimous vote after the charter ratification. Continuity is a shared defense. Erasure is an act of war. No one in the chamber treated that line as poetry. They treated it as operating procedure, and that was why the peace held.